Level 1. The wreck. The wave hits before you hear it coming. 40 feet, maybe more, out of nowhere in the dark. The boat rolls hard onto its side. Something breaks below deck, a sound like the whole hull cracking in half. You grab for a rail that isn't there anymore. Your feet go out from under you. The deck tilts fully vertical for 1 second. Then you're in the water before your mind catches up to what's happening. Cold hits first, then the dark. No up, no down. Just black water pulling you in every direction at once. Your lungs burn. You don't know which way the surface is. You break through, gasping, salt water in your mouth and your eyes. The boat is gone. Not sinking, already gone, swallowed whole in the seconds you were under. Just debris now, scattered across waves taller than any wave you've ever seen from a beach. Rain hits sideways, hard enough to sting. Lightning cracks every few seconds, lighting up the ocean in flashes, just long enough to see how alone you actually are out here. You spot something floating a few feet away, a plastic cooler, half submerged, bobbing in the swell. You swim for it before you've even decided to. Survival instinct moving your arms before your brain finishes the thought. You wrap both arms around it. It's not much. It's barely enough to keep your head above water between waves. But it's something, and right now, something is the only thing standing between you and going under for good. You learn a fact in that first freezing minute that most people never have to learn firsthand. The human body loses heat roughly 25 times faster in water than in air. That means hypothermia, not thirst, not hunger, is the thing most likely to kill you first. And it can happen in hours, not days. You scream for the crew. Your voice disappears into the wind before it even leaves your mouth. Nobody answers. There's no one left to answer. Just the storm, just the cooler under your arms, just black water in every direction, and no land, no lights, no boat, nothing but you and the next wave already building somewhere out in the dark. You hold on and you wait, because waiting is the only thing left that you're still able to do. Level 2. The Raft. Dawn breaks gray and slow. The storm's gone, but the ocean hasn't calmed, just softened into long rolling swells that lift you and drop you every few seconds. Your arms are locked around the cooler, stiff, barely yours anymore after a night of holding on. You spot something bright bobbing 40 yards off, a life raft, half inflated, torn along one seam but still floating. You swim for it, every stroke slower than the last, your body already running on almost nothing. You pull yourself over the edge and collapse inside it, water pools around your knees. The tear leaks slowly, not enough to sink you fast, just enough that you'll be bailing water for as long as you're in this thing. You look around in every direction. No boat, no debris field, no land. Just flat gray horizon, endless. In every single direction, you turn your head. You learn a fact lying there, chest heaving, that settles into your stomach like a stone. Search and rescue operations typically scale back significantly after the first 72 hours without contact, because statistically survival odds drop sharply the longer someone's missing at sea. You don't know exactly how long you were in the water. You know it was hours. You know the clock already started before you even reached this raft. You check your pockets. Nothing useful. No flare, no radio, no food. Just the clothes on your back and a raft with a slow leak, drifting wherever the current decides to take it. You lie back against the side of the raft, sun starting to break weakly through the clouds, and for the first time since the wave hit, you let yourself feel how alone you actually are out here. Level 3. The first night. The sun drops fast once it starts. No slow twilight out here, just gold turning to gray, turning to black in under an hour. The temperature falls with it. Your clothes, still damp from the storm, do nothing to hold any warmth against your skin. You bail water from the leaking seam every few minutes, cupping it out with your hands since you don't have anything better. It's slow work. It's also the only thing keeping the raft from filling up around you while you sleep, if sleep is even something your body will let you do tonight. The ocean sounds different in the dark. You start noticing things you couldn't see before. Splashes near the raft, something moving just under the surface a few feet away, gone before you can tell what it was. You learn a fact sitting there, straining to hear over your own heartbeat. Most predatory marine animals are far more active at night, drawn toward disturbances on the surface, which means the raft rocking and your hands breaking the water while bailing are exactly the kind of signals that can draw attention in the dark. You stop bailing with your hands. You use your shirt instead, wringing it out over the side, keeping every part of your body as far from the water's edge as the small raft allows. The stars come out once the clouds finally clear, more of them than you've ever seen at once. No city lights anywhere to wash them out. It should be beautiful. Right now it just tells you exactly how far from anything you actually are. You try to sleep sitting up, back against the raft's low wall, arms wrapped around your knees. Every splash outside jolts you awake. Every hour feels like 3. You do the math without meaning to. How long you were in the water, how long you've been in the raft, how long until anyone even realizes you're missing. You don't sleep, not really. You just wait for the sky to lighten again, counting each hour as its own small proof that you made it through the last one. Level 4, the plane. The sun's barely up when you hear it, a low distant hum, different from wind or waves. You sit up fast, scanning the sky, heart slamming before your eyes even find it. A small plane, far off, low altitude, moving in a slow searching pattern. You stand up in the raft, waving both arms, screaming until your throat tears. The raft rocks hard under you, nearly tipping. You don't care. This might be the only chance you get. The plane keeps its course, doesn't dip, doesn't circle back. You watch it shrink into a dot, then nothing. Swallowed by open sky the same way the ocean swallowed your boat. You sit back down slowly, chest heaving, arms shaking from more than just the effort. You learn a fact once your breathing settles, one that makes the moment sting worse. From a search plane at typical altitude, a life raft can be nearly invisible against ocean glare and swell shadow, especially without a mirror, flare, or bright marker to catch the light. You had none of those. You were right there, and you were still invisible. You search the raft again, hoping you missed something the first time. Nothing. No flare gun, no signal mirror. Just your hands, your voice, and a raft with a slow leak. You watch the empty sky for a long time after the plane's gone, half expecting it to circle back. It doesn't. The ocean goes quiet again, just water and wind, and you're left with the specific kind of hope that hurts worse than having none at all. Level 5. Thirst. Day 3. Your mouth feels like sandpaper, tongue swollen, throat raw every time you swallow nothing. The sun beats down without a single cloud to break it, and the raft offers almost no shade at all. You learn a fact your body is already teaching you the hard way, hour by hour: dehydration. This severe starts shutting down clear thinking, long before it threatens your life directly, meaning the decisions you make right now, thirsty and exhausted, aren't the same decisions you'd make with a clear head. You catch yourself staring at the ocean around you, endless water in every direction, none of it safe to drink. You know that already, somewhere in the back of your mind. Seawater will kill you faster than thirst alone, the salt pulling more water out of your body than it gives. You know it, and you still catch your hand drifting toward the surface twice, some older, more desperate part of your brain overriding the part that knows better. You stop yourself both times. Barely. Your skin starting to blister across your shoulders and the back of your neck, the sun doing damage you don't have the strength to protect against. You tear a strip from your shirt and drape it over your head and neck, the small relief almost enough to make you cry. By afternoon, your vision blurs at the edges, just slightly, just enough to notice. You blink hard, trying to clear it, and for one disorienting second, you're certain you see land on the horizon. You sit up fast, heart pounding, and watch it dissolve back into empty gray water the moment you focus on it. You lie back down, chest tight, understanding for the first time that thirst isn't just going to hurt your body. It's going to start working on your mind next, and you have no way of knowing yet which one is going to give out first. Level 6, the first catch, day 4. Your lips are cracked, your tongue thick and dry against the roof of your mouth. You haven't had water since the storm, just what little rain caught in the folds of your shirt the first night, barely enough to wet your throat. The sky darkens fast that afternoon, clouds stacking low and heavy. You learn a fact watching them roll in, one that makes your hands start shaking with something other than weakness. The human body can survive roughly 3 days without water under normal conditions, less in heat and direct sun exposure like you've had every day since the wreck. You're already past the point most people make it to. The rain starts. You don't hesitate. You strip off your shirt and stretch it flat across your knees, catching every drop you can, wringing it straight into your mouth. It's not much. It's the first water you've had in 2 days, and it tastes better than anything you remember eating in your entire life. You catch what you can in the cooler too, tilting it to funnel every drop that falls. By the time the rain stops, you've got maybe a cup of water sitting in the bottom. You ration it in your head immediately, small sips, spaced out, making it last as long as it possibly can. Something bumps the raft from underneath. You freeze. A shape moves under the surface nearby, silver, quick, gone before you can make sense of it. A fish drawn to the shade the raft casts on the water below. You don't have a hook, you don't have a line, you have your hands, and a stillness you didn't know you were capable of until hunger taught it to you. You wait, motionless, arm hanging just below the surface until the fish drifts close enough to grab. You miss twice. On the third try, your hand closes around it and you haul it into the raft before it can slip free. It thrashes against the floor of the raft and you hold it down with both hands, shaking, staring at the first food you've had in 4 days. You eat it raw. You don't think about that part too hard. You just eat, and for the first time since the wave hit, your body stops screaming quite as loud. Level 7, the mind breaks. Day 6. Water and fish have kept your body going, barely, but something else is starting to slip. You catch yourself talking out loud, mid-sentence, before you even notice you started. There's no one there. You keep talking anyway. You learn a fact your own mind is proving true in real time. Extreme dehydration, sleep deprivation, and prolonged isolation together can trigger hallucinations even in otherwise healthy people, often within just a few days, especially when combined with extreme heat and physical exhaustion. You didn't believe it was possible until it started happening to you. You see your sister sitting at the other end of the raft. She's not really there. You know that. Some small clear part of your brain still holding on, but you talk to her anyway, because the alternative is silence. And silence out here has started to feel worse than losing your mind a little. The horizon starts playing tricks too. Land appears, disappears, reappears somewhere else entirely. You've stopped trusting your own eyes by the second time it happens. You close them instead, forcing yourself to only trust what you can feel. The raft under you, the sun on your skin, the salt cracking on your lips. You sleep in short, broken pieces, and even then your dreams and your waking hours start blurring together, hard to tell where one ends and the other starts. You wake once certain you heard your name called across the water. You sit up, scanning every direction. Nothing, just waves. You start talking to the cooler like it's a person too, apologizing to it at one point for something that makes no sense even as you're saying it. You catch yourself doing this, and for one brief, sharp moment of clarity, you're more frightened of your own mind than you are of the ocean around you. You grip the side of the raft hard, grounding yourself in the one thing that still feels real, and you tell yourself, out loud, that you have to make it to land before you lose the part of yourself that still knows the difference between what's real and what isn't. Level 8, the second storm. Day 7. The sky changes fast, the same way it did the night the boat went down. Clouds stack dark and low on the horizon, moving in faster than anything should move. You feel the wind shift before you see it, cold suddenly cutting through air that was warm an hour ago. You learn a fact watching the horizon darken, your stomach already sinking with it. A raft that survived one storm doesn't guarantee it survives a second. Repeated wave impact and constant flexing weakens the seams over time, meaning the exact tear you've been bailing water from all week is far more likely to fail now than it was on day 1. The first waves hit within the hour, smaller than the storm that sank your boat, but still enough to lift the raft high and drop it hard. Water pours in over the side faster than you can bail it out. Your hands are already raw from a week of salt and sun, and you keep bailing anyway because stopping means sinking. Lightning cracks close enough that you feel it in your chest. Rain hits so hard it stings your skin, the same sideways rain from the first night, and for a moment you're back there, cold water pulling you under, no idea which way is up. The tear widens. You feel it before you see it, a sudden looseness in the raft's shape. Water rushing in faster now, filling around your knees despite everything you're doing to stop it. You grab your shirt, stuff it into the widening seam, pressing down with both hands, holding a tear closed with nothing but fabric and desperation. It holds, barely. The storm doesn't stop for almost 2 hours, waves rolling over the low walls again and again, you bailing with one hand while the other keeps pressure on the tear. Your arms give out more than once. You keep going anyway, because there's nothing else left to do. The wind finally drops as fast as it rose. The waves flatten into exhausted swells. You sit there soaked, shaking, one hand still pressed against a shirt, jammed into a tear that nearly ended everything, and you realize you survived something you had absolutely no way of preventing, only reacting to, one desperate decision at a time. Level 9. Land. Day 9. Your body's running on almost nothing. The fish you managed to catch, the little rainwater you've rationed, whatever strength is left after a storm that nearly sank you 2 days ago. You've stopped expecting anything to change. That's exactly when it does. You see it first as a shape on the horizon that doesn't move the way clouds move. You don't trust it, not after the mirages, not after the horizon has lied to you more than once already. You watch it for almost an hour before you let yourself believe it's actually there. Land. Not a hallucination this time. It stays exactly where it is, no matter how many times you blink, no matter how many times you look away and look back to test it. You learn a fact staring at that distant coastline, one that makes the moment feel even more fragile than it already does. Ocean currents can carry a drifting raft parallel to visible land for days, without ever actually bringing it closer, meaning seeing the coast is not the same thing as reaching it. You start paddling with your hands, both of them now. The shirt no longer needed to hold a tear that stopped leaking since the storm settled the raft's shape. It's slow, it's exhausting. Your arms scream after minutes, not hours. You don't stop, hours pass. The shape on the horizon grows, slowly, painfully slowly, but it grows. You can make out details now. A shoreline, something green behind it, the outline of what might be buildings catching the last of the daylight. The current shifts in your favor as the sun starts to drop, pulling you steadily now instead of parallel, and you realize with a kind of disbelief you don't have room to fully feel yet that you might actually make it. You keep paddling anyway, because stopping now, this close, isn't a risk you're willing to take. The raft scrapes bottom just as the light starts to fade completely. You climb out into knee-deep water on legs that barely hold you, and you collapse onto wet sand that isn't moving under you for the first time in 9 days. Level 10. The Return. You wake to voices, real ones this time, not the kind your mind invented out on the raft. A man crouches over you, saying something in a language you don't fully catch, another running back up the beach shouting for help. You try to sit up, your body won't let you. They carry you to a small clinic inland, the first roof over your head in 9 days. A doctor checks your pulse, your blood pressure, shines a light in your eyes that makes you flinch harder than it should. You learn a fact lying on that table, exhausted but finally still. Survivors of extended time adrift at sea often face days of medical recovery even after rescue, since dehydration and starvation can cause organ strain that isn't obvious until the body starts trying to recover. They get fluids into you slowly, small amounts at first, because too much too fast can be dangerous after this long, without proper food or water. You sleep for what feels like hours, and turns out to be most of a full day. Someone finds a way to contact the outside world for you. Your sister answers on the second ring, and the sound that comes out of her isn't words at first, just a sound you've never heard a person make, relief and disbelief tangled together. She tells you everyone had stopped hoping 4 days ago. She hadn't. She just hadn't said it out loud to anyone. The flight home takes longer than the rescue did. You spend most of it staring out the window at an ocean you now see differently than you ever did before. Calm and blue from up here, nothing like what it actually is underneath that surface. Your sister is waiting at the gate, the same kind of gate you walked toward 9 days ago from a completely different direction. She doesn't say anything when she sees you. She just holds on, the way you held on to a floating cooler in the dark, both of you understanding without needing to explain it that some things don't need words attached to them. You go home that night to a bed that doesn't rock, a ceiling that doesn't move, silence that isn't filled with waves. You lie there, unable to sleep anyway, your body finally still after 9 days of fighting just to stay above the surface, and you realize survival isn't a moment that ends when you reach the shore. It's something you carry quietly into every ordinary night that follows it.